Hello and welcome to another episode of Pitch Masters. And this week I interview the phenomenal Lorraine K. Lee. Now, Lorraine is an award-winning presenter. She's also a best-selling author of Unforgettable Presence, which I would recommend to anyone. She's also got over 330,000 followers on LinkedIn, and she really is a force to be reckoned with. So this week we talk through her story, her journey from journalism into technology, including what it's actually like to work in Silicon Valley. And then, of course, we get on to presence, understanding presence and its importance, how to build presence in meetings, and my favorite, how to build presence if you are an introvert, because it's absolutely possible. We also talk about building influence, and the episode is honestly just full of stories and tips and tricks and techniques that you can immediately use to improve your life. Now, if you haven't already got a copy, of course, I recommend my own book, Pitch, How to Captivate and Convince Any Audience on the Planet if you want to transform and up your own pitch game. But without further ado, let's get on to the episode. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take some notes. Lorraine K. Lee, what an honor to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderfully. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, my pleasure. So the question I ask all of my guests, and I got a feeling you might be pretty good at this question, is how do you pitch yourself to someone who's never heard of you?
So I start off usually with a mission statement, and then I go into a little bit more of my background afterwards. So of course, the context and the person matters, but for the most part, I'll say something like, "Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine. I'm very passionate about helping professionals go from overlooked to unforgettable, and I do that as a keynote speaker, an author, a teacher." And so something along those lines, especially if it's a new client.
And that's what you call a UPI. Is
Correct.
that
Yeah.
right?
Unique and powerful introduction.
Let's talk about that right off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So UPI is this concept I came up with for my book, Unforgettable Presence, because I have been in so many meetings and networking events and conversations where you meet someone and we can kind of predict what they're going to say, right? It's their name, it's their company. If it's internal to like a new coworker, you'll maybe say like how many years you've been at the company,
Hmm.
and you're really leaving so much on the table. And people also tend to rush through their introductions. And so what I wanted to do with the UPI is to really show that you can take up an extra, 10 seconds, which is not very much, and add like 1 to 2 to 3 additional sentences about you that will make someone interested and want to learn more about you and also get better context, right? Especially internally, a title can mean so many different things. So what is it that you actually do? Go that step deeper. Takes a little bit of extra thought and intentionality, but it goes a long way.
And I think especially in a pitch, people don't realize that this is a missed opportunity because you've got an audience you're trying to persuade. And
Yeah.
part of the persuasion is that you are the people that they should want to work with. So you've got an opportunity there, not just worked in a company for X number of years and that's wasted time, but to say, and here's what I would do for you if we're successful in working together, as an example.
Exactly. And especially with pitches, if you're pitching a product or an idea, like to a VC, for example, they're hearing so many. So anything you
Mhm.
can do to stand out and not sound the same as everyone else, that's immediately going to wake them up, prime them to think differently, more positively of what you're about to say. And so, yeah, that the introduction is so key.
Amazing. Already a nugget of wisdom from you, and we've only just started. So I want to get into presence,
Okay.
especially, of course, your area of expertise. But before we do that, I'd love to just hear a bit about your backstory. How did you get from where you were, I don't know, teenager to this hugely influential author, keynote speaker?
Oh, well, thank you. So, yeah, my journey was not one that I anticipated, as I think many journeys are, and was very passionate about journalism in high school. Went to Northwestern to study journalism undergrad, but knew pretty early on I didn't want to go into traditional journalism. I wanted to do something that used my journalism skills, and I had no idea what that was going to be, right? By the time I graduated, reached out to former internship managers and found out about this opportunity at a startup in Silicon Valley, a messaging startup, and there was a role open in the marketing department. And initially, I'm from LA, so I wanted to move back to LA, but I had been reading all these articles about how lucrative Silicon Valley was and how much opportunity there was.
Right.
So I thought, you know what, let me give it a shot. If I don't like it, I can move back later. And ended up loving it. And it really opened my eyes to the tech industry. But when I joined the workforce, a lot of tech companies were leaning into content and editorial. And so that was perfect timing for me. So I was there for a few years, moved over to SlideShare. If you remember SlideShare,
I
LinkedIn owned it at
do.
the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Throwback. So I was at SlideShare for a few years while LinkedIn owned it. And LinkedIn was always my dream company to work at. Moved over
Right.
to LinkedIn proper. So in total, I was there for 6 years. And then after LinkedIn, moved to a company called Prezi, the presentation platform. I was the first editor there, and was there for 3 years, and that's really where I got into public speaking more seriously because I saw how important it was to growing a career, to showing up confidently with authority. Then got impacted by the tech layoffs at the end of
Yeah.
2022. And that's when I decided to start my own business, Rise Learning Solutions. Gave myself a year, said, let's see what we can make of it. And just actually in a few days will be my exact 3-year anniversary of incorporating. So
Wow,
it's been a
congratulations.
wild ride. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have two questions from what you've just said. The first one is a very naive question, but as someone who's never been to Silicon Valley and only has the perception of what it is in their head, what what's it like? Is it just like tech companies all next door to each other and people taking naps at lunchtime on the beds in the office?
I think it was old tech. I think tech is a little different now, but to your point, we have South Bay and then we have San Francisco. All sort of, people, when I say Silicon Valley, I think are kind of incorporating all of that. A lot of
Yeah.
the hub initially was more of that South Bay. So like Palo Alto, those are the really big, like Facebook office, Google office. And then more companies started moving to San Francisco because, it's more of a city and younger people, they want to go out and socialize more. So it was very just like a special experience. I think I was
Yeah.
part of tech during its height where you had the best holiday parties and so many snacks and fun events and learning opportunities. And now, things are a little bit tighter. There's more pressure on tech companies to be profitable and grow. And certainly there's definitely a lot of benefits and perks, but I think there's also a little bit more rigidity around showing results too.
Yeah, and spending. Less
Exactly.
snacks. Yeah.
Exactly.
We have to bring our own mug to work, otherwise we can't have coffee.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's
That's
labeled
the
as a
ultimate, yeah.
sustainability drive, which is fair
Okay,
enough, I
okay.
suppose. Yeah,
Yeah,
so there we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Just totally off topic. I had the privilege of going to the LinkedIn office in the Empire State Building
Hey,
in
yeah.
November. How does that compare with the West Coast?
It's still, like, very tech, but I feel like, I don't know, the vibe in South Bay, maybe because there's, like, more space a little bit,
Mhm.
down here, it feels a little bit I think there's a little bit more, like, fun incorporated in day to day. I feel like
Yeah.
New York the culture of New York generally, I feel like is more, like, go, go, go and more
Yeah.
intense. But I would
Yeah.
visit because my team, our boss was headquartered or still is headquartered there. So I would go about once a quarter, and it's a beautiful office.
Yeah,
The
it is.
food
Yeah.
did you get to try some of the food?
No.
The cafeteria? Okay. You go next time you're there, yeah, in the cafeteria, get some
Yeah.
lunch. Delicious.
Very good. Now, my other question I had when you were talking about this, so you kind of breezed over this career, LinkedIn, and Prezi, but was there a moment where you realized, hang on a minute, there's maybe something wrong with how others are perceiving me and how I perceive myself, and I need to figure this out.
Yeah, that was really the impetus for the book. In the introduction, I start off talking about my time at LinkedIn, which was amazing, and I loved it. And at the same time, I really wanted to reach that senior leadership level, and I wanted to keep
Yeah.
growing and keep advancing within the company. But I pretty much got stuck at mid level, right? And I could not figure out why, because I felt like on paper I was doing all the right things. I was working hard, people liked me, worked on high visibility projects. So like, that feed in the top right hand corner of your news feed. Like I actually moved to
Yeah.
Hong Kong for a year to help launch that.
Wow.
And I was writing those stories. So some really cool, important projects to the company. But as hard as I push, I never got that promotion that I wanted. And it wasn't until after I left, I had more time to, just you get like a fresh perspective, more time to um, be more introspective, talk to other people. And I realized a big part of what I was missing was presence in terms of how others saw me. And then a few years, no, excuse me, not a few years later, a few months later, I joined Prezi. And then a few months after that, it was COVID. And then that really expanded my view of what presence was. It wasn't just how people saw me, but also, am I even being seen in the right places? So where are they seeing me? Because now we have a video presence. LinkedIn presence became even more important. So that really opened my eyes and allowed me to really work on that skill to advance in Prezi and do things differently than I did at LinkedIn.
So let's get into it a bit then, because presence could be seen as almost quite a conceptual
Yeah.
idea. But if
Hmm.
there's someone listening to this and they think, my goodness, I know exactly how Lorraine felt because that's where I am. I am stuck in middle management and I don't know
Hmm.
what to do about it. How can we be more tangibly affecting our own presence and the perception of others?
So to your point, executive presence rather is very nebulous, and it's like you get feedback like, "I want you to have more presence," and you're like, "Okay, what do you even mean?" Okay, um, so the reason I came up with this different definition is because we hear the word presence, we often think of executive presence, and executive presence has a lot of negative connotations around that. And it can be a very coded way of telling you to maybe appear more masculine at work, right? So there's just a lot that comes with that phrase. And so what I did is I wanted to be really explicit. Okay, presence is about how and where you are seen. And then I wanted presence to be something that is achievable and something that is approachable by anyone. Because executive presence also has this connotation of, oh, I have to be of a certain level or it has to
Mm.
be in person in a high stakes situation. And really, presence is something that can and should be worked on at all points of our career. And so in the book, I talk about, oh, you can have presence in meetings, you can have presence when you present, you can even have presence in a Slack channel, all right, your email. So when you start thinking about it that way, it becomes a lot more digestible, I think. And
Right.
when you start approaching things step by step, it's not like, oh my gosh, I got to fix this whole big thing, whatever presence is. But it's
Yeah.
actually those smaller moments that are just as important as the big moments, if not sometimes more important, because we have many more smaller moments that people see. So that was my hope with redefining it and repositioning it so that people can feel empowered and excited to take it on.
So let's get a few examples. So you mentioned a few things. Let's start with having presence in meetings. What do we do?
Meetings are one of the lowest hanging fruits to stand out
Mm.
and to have presence because so many of them are so bad. And
Right.
so if you just
Here,
do,
here.
a little bit above the bare minimum, people are already going to be like, wow, this was so much better than what I was expecting. So with
Yeah.
meetings, there's a lot of different things that you can do. When you are leading a meeting, there's a few key things that I want you to make sure that you do. So the first is to have an agenda. I know it sounds obvious, and I'm not saying an agenda as in, oh, we're going to talk about X topic, but I want you to really break it down and be very clear. We're going to spend 5 minutes on this, 10 minutes on this, 8 minutes on this. these are the people who are going to be talking about this. These are the questions I'm thinking that I need answered. This is the decision I want to have by the end of the meeting. Just really getting down to the nuts and bolts of it so that everyone can come prepared and they're aligned, right? Like in meetings that are run badly, okay, you feel kind of like you were productive, and it's like, let's have another meeting to
Yeah.
continue the conversation. So an agenda is really key. And then now that a lot of us are distributed or virtual, rules of engagement also very, very important. So how do you want people to participate? I'm an introvert, so especially for the introverts, if I'm in a meeting with 8 people and everyone is muting and unmuting and in the chat and everyone's just all over the place, I have no idea when I'm supposed to jump in. I'm very uptight. I feel nervous and anxious. And so to be the facilitator who creates structure and make sure that all voices are heard, that is presence, making sure that you are also including as many voices as you can and being a good leader.
And so, what if you're not the facilitator and you may be introverted on whatever level of the scale, but you might also be in the context of a hierarchical organization as well? So, Mr. or Mrs. Senior person is leading the meeting and they haven't done the agenda and you don't know when to speak. Is there any advice in that situation?
There's a few things you can do. So if you're more introverted, having an extroverted buddy is always a nice thing. This
Mm,
also works if you're remote, but the rest of the team is in person. How can you find the counterpart to help you share your thoughts and kind of help you find that space to jump in? If there's no agenda, asking the leader ahead of time and asking what they want to talk about and what they hope your contribution will be because you want to show up prepared can be helpful, and maybe even you volunteer to create it, and then
right.
that's a way of you showing your leadership and taking initiative and making the whole meeting better for everyone. And then the chat is always, I mean, as a leader, I always encourage leaders to look to the chat and make sure you're acknowledging it. I actually find that the chat always has better not always, but a lot of the time has better conversation because people have time to think more thoughtfully and craft their
Mm.
response versus like on the whim, this is what comes to mind. So I encourage introverts as well to use the chat, and make sure that, written communication is a strength of an introvert. So leverage that.
So, specifically with more introverted people, when we talk about presence,
Yeah.
is it a, is it is it that there are ways that they should become, at least on the surface, more extroverted? Is that the thinking?
It's not about being more extroverted or louder, which I think is the common misconception, and it
Mm,
stresses us out to think
right,
that to think we have to, and it makes us more tired at the end of the day, right? When you're constantly pretending to be someone you're not. So I do talk in the book, give sort of bonus tips to the introverts because I think there's a lot more of us than we realize in the workplace. And I think for an introvert, it's not about being someone you're not, but leaning into your introvert strengths. So as an example, I just said, introverts are strong writers, use a chat. Well, you also are probably going to be really great at summarizing a meeting and making connections and key
mm,
points and connecting the dots across different teams. You are going to be someone who, yeah, maybe you're not the life of the party at the happy hour, but you're great at connecting one on one. So relationships are so key to the workplace. So keep meeting people and keep talking to people and getting to know them on a deeper level. Maybe the extroverts, they're the life of the party, but maybe it's on a more superficial basis, right? And
right.
then introverts, this is one of my favorites because I think this is very counterintuitive. Introverts are really great public speakers and presenters.
Mm.
And as long as it's in a prepared situation, introverts can really excel. So I know speaking on the fly, spontaneous speaking is a little bit more nerve wracking, but to have structure, to know what's coming up, introverts are great at preparing, again, great at connecting with people, so they're going to understand their audience. Those are all things that you can lean into. Public speaking is still going to get you that visibility in a controlled way, right? Whether it's the all hands or presenting at a team meeting. So understanding what your strengths are and leaning into those.
So let's talk about presenting a bit then, because that was another example you gave of presence. So we've done meetings.
Yes.
How do we prepare ourselves or actually execute the best possible presence that we can in front of an audience?
There's a few different things to think through. So the first is your video presence, and this can also apply to meetings. So a lot of us are virtual now. So how
Yeah.
you show up on camera is really, really key. So I mentioned Danny when we logged on, I was like, oh, I love your setup, right? You look professional to me. You look approachable, like all these things, and the impression that I form can happen through the way that you've curated your space and how you're showing up on camera, right? It's not just like your head zoomed up super close. You're making eye contact with me. I can see some of your body. It feels more like a natural in person interaction. That's really important, right? Like I still think people are sometimes see video presence as a throwaway moment. And I
Right.
still see some crazy angles and dark rooms, and you would think would have it figured out by now, but we don't. So how people see you, like that quick, you know, 1/10 of a millisecond or however short it is, like they are judging you, right, based on your video presence. And then after that, you start thinking about the content, you start thinking about the audience. So, one of the frameworks I really like that my mentor, Spencer Waldron, shared with me is the think, do, feel matrix. So,
Hmm.
mapping out how does your audience currently think about the topic you're about to share? What are they doing in regards to that topic? How do they feel about it? Now, when I make the presentation, how do I want them to think differently, do differently, feel differently afterwards? Going through that very small exercise, thought exercise, can be really eye opening to understand, okay, let me take out this content. Yeah, let me take this out. They're not going
Yeah.
to care about this. Like, let me focus on only the important things because when we work on a project, everything's important to us and we're excited about everything.
Yeah.
You really have to understand the audience to know how to make the presentation as targeted as possible for them. And then, of course, there's a delivery as well. So, using hand gestures, making sure that you have variety in the three P's: pace, pitch, and power. And having variety there and making sure that you're not just speaking monotone, which is something that
Yeah.
happens very often in meetings as well and presentations. So there's so much you can do, but again, like step by step, right? We're not trying to do everything at once.
Do you do a lot of keynote speaking these days, right? That's Was that something that you've done for a long time in terms of you're used to presenting, or is that kind of came with that pivot in your career?
It is not something that I've been doing for a super, super long time. To mention, I joined a company called Prezi. About a year into being at Prezi, I saw my colleague who I mentioned, Spencer, and I was like, wow, Spencer's really good at public speaking. He just
Mm.
appears so confident and authoritative on camera. This was virtual, right? 2021. And I
Right.
was like, wow, I want to be like that. And so I had done a little bit video at LinkedIn, always very, very nervous.
Right.
I knew it was important. I already had an inkling then it was very important. And now at Prezi, I'm like, okay, I want to step into this more senior role. I want to aim for that director level. And so this can be one of the things that gets me there. And so reached out to Spencer, asked if he would mentor me. He said yes, thankfully. And then because this was the start of 2021, a lot of virtual events still happening. So I
Yeah.
got to practice a lot. And didn't do it with the intention of it being a career later on,
Right.
but saw that, even though I was nervous, like I still kind of had fun and was improving and people seemed to, and, they kept inviting me. So there was opportunity. So I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm not like horrible at this if people are seeing me and wanting to invite me again. And then I remember making money the first time from a keynote, and that was a very big unlock. The first time you make money outside of your corporate job. And then the public speaking led to things like becoming a LinkedIn learning instructor, being on more podcasts. And so that's how it grew. And that's why after the layoff, I had like just enough momentum where I thought, okay, let me give this a shot.
And do you do many in-person presentations?
Do some. but not as many.
Do you feel it's quite different, or you just apply the same rules?
I yeah, it's funny you asked that. When I did my first in person, I was so nervous and I didn't know
Mhm.
how it was going to translate. But I realized a lot of the things that I learned virtually did help me in person.
Right,
I
right.
feel like honing in on my virtual presence gave me more energy, or, like, even in everyday life, I'm much more animated when I speak with my hands.
Yeah.
I just generally have more energy that came from practicing this skill. So it did carry over to in person. Now, something I noticed about in person is as an introvert, it was so funny. The first event I did, I thought it was going to be this quiet room, and it was kind of in the middle of this expo. And so there was a lot of noise around and people
Okay.
talking, and I was like, "Oh my god, just like focus, focus, focus."
Yeah.
So that was hard, but since then I've had, talks where the focus is me, and, so that's been great. But I actually, again, if we're talking about introvert strengths, I prefer virtual. I feel like that's where I really can differentiate myself with not just, like, the way I present, but also the visuals. And again, like, if we're comparing it to meetings, the expectation is quite low. So I feel like I put a lot of time and thought and consideration into it, and so people are always like, "Wow, that's so different," and so, that's what gets me happy and excited.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. The
Yeah.
pitching, presenting,
Ah,
the bar is so low
yeah.
that if you can just do anything just a little bit different, a little bit special, a little bit more than what people normally do, which is just the same as what everyone else has always done, then you've got such a huge differentiator.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Now, the question I get a lot, and I thought you'll be an expert on this, is when we pitch especially, and we're in a boardroom environment, one of the key ways to persuade another individual is through making an emotional connection with them, rather than just trying to persuade with facts and figures. And when we're in a room, we have some advantages with real eye contact and and touching in terms of handshakes and movement that is three-dimensional. Do you have any thoughts on how we can ensure that we can create that emotional connection when we're doing things over video?
Eye contact is going to be your first line of defense. So, to your point, like when we meet people in person, we shake hands and we can make eye contact. Both things reduce a hormone called oxytocin, which is also known as a social bonding hormone. Now, virtually, of course, we don't have the skin to skin contact that releases that. So, eye contact, that's what we're left with. And so, focusing on the eye contact is going to be really critical to that. A lot of people you still see looking off to the side like this.
Oh, I hate that.
And imagine this whole podcast, I'm just like over here, you're like, what is she even looking at? So
Or
eye
even
contact,
worse, they're like over here, but
yeah,
their
oh
camera's
gosh.
up here,
Yeah,
and it's like looking at the back of
yeah.
their head or something ridiculous. But
I
yeah,
know there's some crazy setups. So that one is really helpful. And then to your point, like sharing a story right away. I used to present, and again, like, hi everyone, I'm Lorraine, and I'm here to talk. I'm excited to talk about whatever the topic is. And I was someone who leaned very heavily on like data and
right,
facts and figures. And then I realized, oh, okay, I got some coaching too. Like people can see the title on the slide. I don't need to reiterate it. They know why they're here.
right.
Let me just I don't even introduce myself to start. I just launch into a story, get their attention, try to earn their trust sooner. And then once you've gotten their trust, then I talk a little bit about myself and give the intro. So I have found that format to be really powerful.
So you start with a cold open essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have a kind of a go-to cold open that works over and over again, or do you try and think of a new story every time?
It depends on the topic. So when I talk about, when I give my session on presence and building a brand, I talk about my LinkedIn story that I shared with you and sort of that
Yeah.
struggle to get to that next level. When I talk about, like meetings before, I do the like imagine a world, da 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 da, like,
Well,
where
do it properly. I want to
okay.
hear it.
Imagine a world where, people leave your meeting feeling excited, productive, helping your audience imagine what the future state is. And gosh, who doesn't want a meeting where people actually enjoy themselves? So it gets people
Right.
hooked in like, oh, I'm going to learn that in this session. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to stay focused now. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but I think starting with, like as you said, Daniel, cold open can really captivate people because again, they're not expecting it.
Right. And do you get nervous still today?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
How do you
and
deal
I
with that?
Yeah, Spencer, who I mentioned earlier, he said this funny line once, and he said, "There's two types of speakers in this world: speakers who get nervous, and speakers who lie about it."
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the
Or a
nerves are
third, which is a psychopath, I think
yeah,
they're described as,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely get nervous, but it's so much more contained now than how it used to be. So
Right.
previously, a lot of sweating and cold hands and all this happening simultaneously, which was super weird, and just like dry mouth and all the things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so now it's a little nervous, but like I can hop onto a speaking engagement pretty quickly after a meeting. Like before, I might have needed like an hour of just time to get in the right headspace and all of that. So for me, what helped before dry mouth is, of course, drinking more water. I know it sounds obvious, but especially when you're nervous, it's hard to do and have those breaks and to just get
Yeah.
that
Well, I
sip of
think some
water.
people
Yeah.
who haven't done it very much, who are therefore the most nervous people, don't realize that they're about to get a dry mouth. So it's
Yeah.
not really the most obvious thing because they haven't
Yeah.
brought a bottle of water and they're on the stage doing this.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you can hear it in the microphone, yeah. Um, Nervous energy, kinda dance it out, just do something
Dance it
physical.
out. I like that.
Yeah, do something
Yeah.
physical before. Maybe, some people like to actually work out before, that's not my thing, but
Right.
just do something to shake out the nerves. So, like, you'll see like, especially virtually, like if someone's sitting, if you see nervous energy, you'll see them kind of swinging in their chair like this or rocking back and forth in person or virtual.
Yeah.
So that's something to watch out for. That's why it's always good to watch your recordings back, even though it's
Mhm.
very uncomfortable, right, to hear your voice. And then I think also, so something Matt Abrahams taught me, he's a lecturer at Stanford GSB and
Yeah.
also a keynote speaker himself, communications expert, and interviewed in the book. He talks about the difference between symptoms and sources. And so I think that's also a helpful differentiation where symptoms are going to be what you're feeling physically, what you're noticing in yourself. The source is, well, why am I nervous? Like, it's more psychological. Like, is it because I want to be perfect? Is it because I think the audience is judging me? And so you can tackle two sides of the coin to make sure that you're in the
Right.
best place possible before you get on stage or get on camera.
What's your worst experience ever in front of an audience, either in a meeting or
Yeah, I
presentation?
I went to this speaker boot camp last year, 2 years ago, maybe, and it was a bunch of very, very seasoned speakers. And I went to this boot camp to understand: do I want to lean into in person speaking because
Right.
it's different. You make more money, right, than virtual usually.
So you're an attendee or you were teaching there?
I was an attendee.
You're an attendee,
So,
okay.
yeah, so I was an attendee, but the attendees had a chance to go on stage and to give a little
Mhm.
presentation. And not only were there a bunch of other mostly much more experienced keynote speakers in the audience, there were speaker bureau representatives there as well.
Right.
And I just got so nervous and in my head. And as I was talking, I just completely blanked, like in the
Right.
middle. And
We've all been there.
I was like, "Oh my god." Just completely freaked out, and I paused, and I went back a little bit and just kept going, and it was really nice afterwards. There was, like, a little panel sort of giving you feedback afterwards, and
Yeah.
they said that's, like, the way to do it is to not be like, "My gosh," or just, like, get in your head, but just
Yeah.
pause calmly, and thankfully, the words came back to me, and that was mortifying, yeah, and I was, just it was rough, but, like, now I know I got through that. It's just it makes you more confident, right?
And the interesting thing is you in your head, to use your words, you were mortified, but the audience probably barely even noticed that little slip.
You know what? Yeah.
Plus, perhaps even more powerful is they probably warmed to you even more because they felt that empathy, and no one wants anyone on stage to fail. I think it can be quite humanistic, not to do it on purpose ever, but
Yeah.
I bet people liked you more in that audience watching you do that.
Yeah, it's so funny you said that, Danny, because people came up to me after. They knew it was like maybe only the second or third time I had been on stage. And so people were
Right.
coming up to me after and they were like, "Oh my gosh, like that was so great. You were like brave enough to go
Yeah.
up there and like you did a great job." And so, yeah, totally agree with that.
So what about your best? Do you remember anything you've done and you're like, "That was just the best feeling in the world"? Because it can be
Anytime
euphoric when you come out of a talk, can't it?
Anytime I do a virtual session, I always feel that way after because you see, I have a feedback for also in person, but I do more virtual, right? So like
Mm.
I have a feedback form and to see people's feedback afterwards when it's very positive and they say, this helped me think differently, or I'm excited to try this, or this was, one of the best sessions I've seen. Like, yeah, that feels really good. And so I think I've again, like practice makes perfect. So I've done so many virtual sessions now. I've really dialed it in. And that's when I always feel at my best. Like you said, like a little bit of that adrenaline dump after. It was funny actually that this reminds me, like when I did some of my first sessions, I like couldn't work the rest of the day because my body was just
Right,
so tired.
right.
Now I get back to work, but, yeah, it's been fun to sort of see that transformation and to see always the feedback I get anytime I do a virtual keynote.
I mean, it's something that I talk about as well is ideally, if you're doing a big pitch presentation session, you shouldn't have anything in your day before it, any other meetings or anything. You should treat yourself like a king or a queen and eat the best food and have
Yeah,
a bath if you want and listen to music, get yourself calm. And afterwards, ideally, you should have nothing as well because the emotional, mental load,
yeah.
even when you're just saying out loud what you've practiced 100 times before. I don't know whether you know Rory Sutherland. He's a speaker and behavioral scientist. He told me one of my favorite quotes is whenever he does a talk on stage, he immediately goes back to his hotel room and sits in his pants in the dark. And in the UK, that means his underpants.
I mean, I can see that how that would be very relaxing.
Yeah,
I've definitely gone back to my room too for in-person engagements afterwards. So,
yeah,
and as
yeah.
an introvert too, right? It's like double effect where it's like you
Right.
need that recuperation time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we talked a lot about presence. Let's talk a little bit about influence
Okay.
instead. Tell me your philosophies on influence.
Influence reminds me a little bit about presence too, in the sense of we all want it. How do
Mm.
we get it? Sometimes what is it? And so for me, I came up with a framework in the book, the RAVE model, for how to build influence, concrete steps and ways that you can build influence. So RAVE stands for relationships, appearances, visibility, expertise. These are what I view as the four key criteria to start building influence at work. And so within these four criteria, of course, there's a lot of different things you can do, but bucketed, I think these criteria are going to be some of the most critical to focus on if you're trying to build influence at work.
Right, let's go through them.
Okay. Relationships. We alluded to this earlier. Relationships are so important in the workplace. Now, it can be hard to get 30 minutes, an hour to meet with an executive, right? And get to know each other and build that relationship. So, what's a small thing that we can do? Small talk, but not your usual small talk. A lot of us are on autopilot when we have small talk, and that's why we don't like it. So if we're passing each other in the snack room, Danny, and you ask, "How was my weekend?" and I'm going to say, "Oh, my weekend was good. How was your weekend?" and you're going to say, "Oh, my weekend was good, thanks." And then conversation falls flat. And neither one of
Right.
us had to think about what we were saying. It was just on autopilot.
And neither one of us gained anything
Yeah,
at all from the conversation either.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's those moments where we pass executives in the hall or we log on to a meeting and maybe we're the only ones there to start. How can we turn off autopilot small talk and instead have more powerful conversations? Well, that is asking the right questions and also giving the right responses. So I also talk about this concept called conversational threading in the book. And this is essentially asking questions that will elicit more threads. And also, if you are answering a question, try to give more threads. So in this instance, you ask me, instead of how was your weekend, you might ask, oh, Lorraine, what was the highlight of your weekend? Now I
Right.
have to actually pause and think, what did I do this weekend? And then if I'm giving you more threads, I won't just say one thing. I might say, oh, I did, a bike ride. I celebrated my friend's birthday at this new bar, and I got to read, this book that I've really been enjoying. And now, Danny, you have 3 threads. So like you can pull on
Right.
one of those 3 and then, oh, what book are you reading? And I go into it and maybe it piques your interest and you start reading. And then we chat again
Right.
and then we can talk about the book. So there's a lot of power in, again, a short conversation, but being intentional about that conversation.
I like that. I heard a good tip from my friend Robbie Crabtree, and he always says, "What's good?" That's his opening because I'm always like, "How are you? Fine. How are you?
Yes.
Fine."
Yeah.
He's like, "What's good?" And I'm like, "What's good?" And it's such a tweak, but I'm like, he only wants to know the good things that are happening right now, and I've got to all of a sudden filter that in my mind a little bit because he wants to know something positive. So I've got to say, "Oh, my
You know what else?
podcast," and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And what else that does too is you're now thinking positively about the conversation as well. When I
Yeah.
ask you how's work go, we're coworkers. I'm like, oh, like how's work been? And you're like, oh, it's been like so busy. I have,
Awful.
yeah. You're like, I just have all this stuff. Like, how about you? I'm just like, okay, I guess this is like the vibe of the conversation now. But if
Right.
it's, oh, like, what are you excited to be working on right now, or what's good? You have to
Yeah.
think, and it's just a different energy.
So is there a nuance here? So let's say that you're a junior member of staff and you just happen to bump into the CEO in the corridor and he or she says, "How are you?" Do you go, "Well, I'm going to tell you 3 things about my weekend." You know, is
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is there a way of knowing whether someone perhaps doesn't want small talk?
I think in that instance, yeah, you're always sort of using your best judgment, right? If the CEO is kind of like
Yeah.
walking fast and doesn't really seem to want to talk, one thing that I like to do instead of saying, "Oh, I'm good," is again use a more positive, different word. "Oh, I'm doing wonderfully," and maybe you just keep it there. Or, "Yeah, the day's been great
Smashing
so
my sales
far."
targets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hit my, and you can
Yeah.
add a little something. Yeah,
Yeah.
just signed a big client or just had a great conversation with a client, like something just very quick and snappy. But going back to your first question of this whole podcast of the UPI, always have in mind if an executive is going to, if you're going to pass an executive and they ask who you are, what you've been up to, like have some sort of answer ready in your back
Right.
pocket. And then
Yeah.
similarly, like if they ask how you're doing and they maybe do want to engage in some talk, always have in mind, oh, like, maybe you pull something from the most recent all hands, or they
Yeah.
sent out an email, or you saw something in the news. So just having that in your back pocket. And again, presence is all about um, intentionality. So it's not kind of leaving things to chance. It's about preparation and being thoughtful about these key touch points
Yeah.
and key moments.
So that's R.
Oh,
Let's go
yes.
to A.
Appearance, we touched on parts of it already. So video presence, I think is really important, very underrated still, can make a big difference in how you're perceived. And then appearance also can be things like the clothes you wear, right? Your body language, like, are you someone who's always like shoulders hunched and that's what
Mm,
people see? Or do you have your shoulders back and you look like a generally confident person? So again, small tweaks that make a big difference. sit up straight in your video calls. Yeah, exactly. Don't be kind of like looking around all the time or look like you're like clicking on other links. Like all
Yeah.
of that shapes perception. Even if you don't think you're being watched, like someone sees you. So be mindful of that.
Now you've said it, you are sitting up very straight. I've just noticed that.
Just
I
like
tend to
extra
lounge
pillow
around a
to just
little
give
bit.
me some support because otherwise it's
Yeah,
very
no, good.
comfortable to lean far back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you got to practice what you preach as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, V.
All right, V visibility. This is where I really faltered at LinkedIn,
Right.
where I thought the hard work would speak for itself. And I didn't realize that I had to not just do the good work, which was expected, but also talk about the work. And you have to talk about the work more than once. You have to remember that everyone's really busy, they're focused on themselves. You have to constantly be your own champion, right? Because if not you, then who? So always make sure that you are finding ways to be visible, but don't just be visible for the sake of being visible, right? I know we're talking about influence, but if we go back to, the idea of presence again, how others see us, where others see us, and we want to make sure it's the right place. So we're not just, constantly talking about our wins and our team channel, we want our executives to see. So where are they? Is there a different team channel? Is there a company intranet? So when I was at Prezi, I remember asking my boss, like, where should I post this weekly newsletter I want to write? Because I want people to see what I do and what my team did, lesson learned from LinkedIn, right? A
Yeah,
takeaway from LinkedIn. And I was like, should I create like a special email listserv and people can just sign up? And she's like, just post it on the internet. That way everyone will see it. And
right.
it turned out, I didn't realize because I was new, but it turned out that that was the place that everyone went to for news. And so now I had data scientists, pinging me each week being like, oh, did you know we had this dashboard? Or like, what about this person? And engineers reaching out too. And sometimes the C suite as well commenting. So making sure that you're being visible in the right places and being seen by the right people. And then there's also different ways to talk about your work as well, because I know, especially for introverts, they can feel very self-conscious, not wanting the spotlight. So there are also
Right.
ways to position how you talk about your work so that it hopefully feels a little bit more natural, but still gets your point across.
Yeah, and to that point, so I was on the panel a few weeks ago, and one of the questions was, how do you talk about yourself in a way that, shows people what you're doing when really it just feels like a brag and it feels so uncomfortable and against everything that you kind of stand for?
There's a few techniques that I really like. So one is simply adjusting the language that we use. There was research published in Harvard Business Review that showed that when we use more collaborative language, like we, us, our, you're actually seen as more of a leader versus the person who's always using I
Mm,
statements. I did this, I did that.
right.
And that's very powerful, especially as a team leader. If you're an introvert, you don't like all the attention on you, frame it in terms of a team effort. And it usually is a team effort, right? Rarely do we sort of get things done on our own. And especially if you're a team lead and you frame it like that, the work everyone knows it always goes back to you as the team leader, but now you're positioning it in a way that not only lifts others up, but again, sort of shapes that perception of how they see you. Another one that I really like, that I did often at Prezi is talk about learnings. So not
Mm,
just, oh, my team did this, or like an example is, okay, this content theme did really well. It, surpassed our expectations.
mm,
Instead, we would frame it as, okay, this content theme did really well, and this might be helpful for the email marketing team as they think about topics to promote, and
right.
this might help increase like open rates. I know this is maybe something that you all were working on. This was a goal of yours, so now I'm showing an understanding of their work and giving ideas for how they can also succeed as well. So when you can share it in terms of learnings, I think that's also very powerful.
All right, good stuff. The E, we're on E, rave. Let's finish our rave.
Yeah. We have expertise. Um, this is not only knowing your stuff, which is important, right? You want people to know what they can come for you for. I also like to talk about LinkedIn in terms of expertise. because it's important to be known internally, yes. And I also think it's important to build your brand outside of work. And when you can show your expertise by being invited on panels or podcasts or being interviewed for articles, that does increase your brand and perception internally as well. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive because a lot of people still think, "Oh, LinkedIn, if I'm posting, it looks like I'm looking for a job." But when I
Right.
started posting more on LinkedIn, because not everyone can do it, they don't feel comfortable because it is kind of scary, like public speaking, to sort of take that first step. I know people internally like thought of me as more senior, like, oh, here's this person sort of putting her face out there and putting her thoughts
Yeah.
out there. And when the time came for an opportunity internally, there was this media roundtable, and the person who initially was going to do it, I think, was sick. They saw that I was public speaking, they saw that I was posting on LinkedIn, and they asked me to step in.
Right.
And funny enough, one of the people in that roundtable, a few years later would become a client when I started my own business. So it
Nice.
just all comes full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about LinkedIn then. So
Yeah.
how often should we post on LinkedIn? Because I hear so many different things, and every day I see posts about, oh, the algorithm's changed, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know about the algorithm
Yeah.
anymore. But do you have general rules that you recommend? Because you've got how many 300 and something thousand
Yeah.
followers on,
330 ish. Yeah.
yeah, which is impressive to say the least.
Thanks. So my rule of thumb with LinkedIn is consistency is more important than number of times per week. I
Mm,
think LinkedIn's official guidance is, last time I checked, is 4 times a week. That's a lot, especially
yeah,
for someone starting out. That's too much, I think. You're going to burn out. So what I like to tell people is you wanna stay consistent and you wanna set the bar really low for yourself. So once a month, can you start there? Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can post once a month. Okay, once you start, you're like, okay, that wasn't too bad. Maybe you go twice a month. Then maybe you go once a week, and just make it so that it can be a consistent practice. It's not the posting on LinkedIn that's actually the hardest, it's the consistency. I
yeah,
talked to Ross Pomerantz, also known as Corporate Bro, interviewed for my book, and he shared this story with me of they people go to him and they're like, "Hey, can you like engage with my post?" Because he's has a big following, and if he engages, it'll get a lot more
yeah,
visibility. And he's like, "You know what? If you can be consistent and like come back to me in a few months, then maybe I'll think about collaborating in this way." And he says not one person has ever come back to him because they don't stay consistent, and it's hard because LinkedIn too,
yeah.
like, you start posting, you get, like, 2 likes and 1 is from your mom. Yeah, it doesn't feel great, but you have to
Not
keep
my
at it.
mum.
Yeah,
Yeah. She doesn't know what LinkedIn is, bless her. But yeah.
yeah, but you yeah, it's harder, it doesn't you don't have as much of that immediate dopamine as you do with, like, an Instagram or a TikTok, so
Yeah.
it takes a little bit more resilience, I guess I would say, to keep at it, but consistency is key and is the hardest part.
And what advice have you got for younger people? So I can give you an example that I work with some apprentices. Also, my son is 20. He's just starting his kind of corporate career. And I'm like, dude, you got to post on LinkedIn. And he's like, I have no idea what to post. I've just got
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
What advice to give to those people?
So the first piece of advice I would give is around mindset, which is to not feel like whatever you post has to be the most groundbreaking, unique
Mm,
insight. I hear this a lot when I speak about LinkedIn to companies. They're like, they'll raise their hand during Q&A and they're like, well, I was so close and I had this idea, but
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like people have talked about it before. And I'm like, yeah, like everyone has. Like I always say like nothing on LinkedIn is unique. We're all saying similar things in different ways. But what is different and why someone might follow me versus someone else who also talks about presence and communication and leadership is that they feel connected to me. They feel like they know me or that we have some similarities, or maybe they're an introvert too and the other person's an extrovert, right? So it's like it's the personal human element. So first thing is around mindset. And then the second thing is to realize that we all have something to share. And so I break it down into 3 buckets for content types: personal, educational, professional. So I would encourage your son and other apprentices to think about, what stories or what can I share within each. A lot of people start with educational because that's the easiest. What can I teach
Yeah.
someone? So you could talk about what you've learned through the interview process. You could talk about how you figured out what you want to do. You could talk about, I feel like younger people are much more, much better at social media. I don't know. You could teach about social media. Like, I don't know whatever
Right.
it is that you're passionate about. Um, Professional. So if you're trying to get into a certain industry, read what's going on in the news, share some thoughts around an article that you read.
Yeah.
Be one line, two lines. Like, it doesn't have to be, it can even be to start. Found this article interesting, right? Just to kind of get comfortable
Right.
posting. And then
Right.
personal is really where the content shines. Like I said before, is you want people to get to know you and to share your personal stories as much as you feel comfortable and is appropriate for a platform like LinkedIn. But challenges you've gone through, personal stories, people really resonate with those.
What's your most viral LinkedIn post?
The most viral in recent times, what maybe a few months ago, was highlighting a CNBC article I wrote about why you need to stop saying sorry so much.
Right.
People got pretty heated in the comments.
Provocative absolutely works on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I find.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to be that provocative. I mean, but
No.
everyone has an opinion, right? Of like, cultural and but there, you should apologize if you say something wrong. There's so much nuance to it. So people got
Yeah.
fired up about that one.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is you talk in the book about being an Asian female. Now, I am not an Asian female. Um, I'm the mainstream, and I can only understand and try and understand how people from different diverse backgrounds face different challenges to someone like me. But I hope that there are a very diverse audience listening to this podcast, and I'd like to touch on it. So, keen to know what kind of challenges you've faced, if you're comfortable talking about it, and what advice you've got for others, including people like me who can be better allies.
Well, I appreciate the question. Yeah, not a lot of people have asked me. Yes, I do talk about my experience as an Asian American woman and also touch on generally the experiences of underrepresented people in the workforce because it's different. So I think like internally for me, the thought around like hard work and staying humble about my work and not really talking about it and sort of a deference to authority, I think that was very ingrained in me. Like, I think people can feel this naturally, even if you are not Asian American. But I had sort of that extra layer where I was like, oh, this is really just like how things are. And this is what you're taught. And it's just like very internalized as you
Right.
grow up. So I think that was a big thing to break free from. And I interviewed my friend and speaker, Jerry Wan, in the book. And I asked him, it can sometimes I get the question about, well, how can you stay true to yourself, but also corporate America feels like you have to kind of go against all that. And he gave this
Yeah.
really poignant advice where he said, our parents, they gave certain advice because they grew up in a different time. And so we can still honor the values that are important to our culture, to our family, while also understanding that we have more information now and we understand how the rules of corporate America is, and that if we want to succeed and excel, there are certain things that we have to start doing that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Again, like you're not going to want to do something that like at the very core goes against, some against a really important value, but like deference to authority, your boss actually wants to hear your opinion and they hired you for a reason, right? And so it's
Right.
not disrespectful to say, oh, wait, I don't know if that quite makes sense, or have we thought about this idea, or, oh, I actually recommend we go in this direction, right? It's not always just like, oh, what do you want to do? Your boss wants you to make
Right.
it as easy as possible for them. So knowing that we have more information and perhaps on a personal side we can still respect our elders and do all of that, like I think that was like a very powerful learning for me. And then there are stereotypes as well that come with being an Asian American. and I interviewed Webflow CEO Linda Tong in the book, and she gave this great anecdote. Um, she worked for the NFL. People wouldn't expect an Asian American woman to necessarily be, high up at the NFL, and so she basically used that to her advantage. And she's like, I know you have these stereotypes about me. I'm actually gonna just show like I'm such a super fan. I'm gonna be great at my job and I'm gonna just shock all of you and it's gonna work
Love it.
in her favor, right? And then Vin Jang, also communication expert, I think over 4 million, yeah, Instagram followers now. He gave this great advice too, where he um said he just imagined that there was no ceiling, like be so good they can't ignore you. The bamboo ceiling is, what we call it, but like be
Yeah.
so good they can't ignore you. So be so good at your craft and don't even think about the ceiling because that limits you, right? Like just keep going, be great at what you do. Um, don't feel like there are any limitations. Because even that mindset, I think can, if you're thinking there's a barrier, that even can get in your head a little bit. So it's just about focusing on you, doing the best that you can. And so I appreciate your question. I feel like you already asking that shows a lot about like who you are and your personality. And so I think, yeah, when you see someone in the office or like at an event who might be a little bit quieter or having trouble kind of breaking in, to just be aware of all those people,
Mm.
introvert, Asian American, someone else, and just make space for their voice to be heard. But I appreciate the question. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a big fan of Vince. Is he someone who was you interviewed for the book?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, he's great. Now, brings me on to another question, actually. You interviewed a ton of amazing people for
Yeah,
the book.
yeah,
Some of my heroes, I
yeah.
kept hearing their name in the book. I don't know whether you can answer this one, but is there like one bit of advice from all of these amazing people that really stood out and resonated with you the most?
Yeah. Thought you were gonna ask me who's my favorite, and I was like, I can't answer that. um,
Oh, yeah, no, let me ask you that actually, yeah. That's a better question.
no, no, I don't have a favorite. They were all like that was my favorite part about this book process was, wow, I gotta
Yeah.
reach out to all my heroes and just talk to all these amazing people. So it wasn't that there was one piece of advice that stood out, but I would say like imposter syndrome popped up as a theme that even top executives face. And so that
Mm.
was like, it's just good to be you know it, but then it's, like, good to be reminded of it every now and then. So, I interviewed, like, many C-suite leaders at, large companies. I interviewed authors, keynote speakers, um, content creators, like, such a broad spectrum of people, so that was one thing. And then, really focusing on your craft, was another. Being open to feedback to keep improving, also another theme. And then great advice if you dive in for any of the listeners around communication as well. But yeah, we really covered the gamut. We talked about your career brand, also known as a personal brand, executive presence, yeah, influence, meetings, presentations, LinkedIn, a lot of advice from different people on different areas. So I was really appreciative that they all made the time.
And if you could speak to anyone in the world for advice who you've never spoken to before,
For
a
advice,
hero, past or present,
you know who the person who comes to mind actually is Amy Poehler.
right?
Yeah, I have been loving her podcast. I feel like she is so smart, so personable. She has a great presence. Seems like a really kind person. She just seems like a great person to get to know. Yeah.
Have you ever reached out to her?
I haven't, no, she just won her Golden Globe for her podcast, which is very exciting, but yeah, I've never reached out, no.
Maybe you should.
Maybe, yeah, it's good inspiration, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Um, Now we haven't got time to go into personal brand and all of the other amazing things in your book, but I have one question. The K, Lorraine K. Lee, is that a personal brand
It
decision? Was
is,
that when you became an author? I'm always curious. I love it. It's got such a ring to it, but I
thank
wanted to
you.
get your thoughts.
So that was when I started writing articles in high school. I thought it just added a little something to my byline. It would allow for less confusion if there was another Lorraine Lee out there. And yeah, I think it kind of, like you said, like it just kind of completes the name. So
Yeah.
I kept it, and then like I mean that was my brand, writing a lot of articles, and I didn't want to switch it when I started doing the speaking and all that. So yeah, the consistency, and you just keep building and growing on that.
Yeah. I think it pops. I love it.
Thanks. Okay, never got that feedback. Love it.
Yeah. Okay, so where can people find you and what do you want them to know about? Tell us everything.
Yes. Okay. So of course, LinkedIn. Find me there. You can connect with me. Send me a message that you heard me on this podcast. Would love to say hello. I will have launched my first ever masterclass by the time this podcast comes out. It's going to be a 1.5-day experience on learning how to communicate your value and create your value narrative so that you can talk confidently about what you do and its impact in any situation. Hopefully, there will be another cohort coming out around the time that this podcast comes out. So you can find out more on my website. I have a free 5-day email course as well that teaches you how to go from invisible to influential. So you can grab that there. And then Instagram as well, Lorraine K. Lee,
And what's the website?
LorraineKlee.com.
Lorraine K. And there's loads of
Yeah.
free resources and cool
Yeah,
stuff
lots
on
of free
there.
resources on the website. So check that out. And then I have many LinkedIn learning courses on topics like communication and presenting and public speaking. So if you go to LinkedIn Learning, many of them are 10 minutes or less. So I encourage you to check those out too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Just my final question is always, do you have a final thought for everyone listening?
I would reemphasize that presence is a skill for everyone. It's something that we should start as soon as possible working on, and we'll continue to build and grow it over time. But it's something certainly achievable and doable. And even in those small moments and those small steps, you will start noticing differences. So I'm very excited for the listeners here to get going, and send me updates on LinkedIn, how you're implementing the tips and frameworks. I would love to hear.
Amazing. Lorraine K. Lee, you are an inspiration. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Pitch Masters with me, your host, Danny Fontaine. You can find me on social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just search for Danny Fontaine or Pitch Guy for exclusive clips from behind the scenes and from the show. You can also find where to order my book, Pitch: How to Captivate and Convince Any Audience on the Planet, by searching on Google or visiting pitchguy.co.uk, where you'll also find additional resources and a newsletter to sign up to for exclusive content. As always, thank you so much for listening. Your support means absolutely everything to me. And feel free to reach out to me via my website as well. I absolutely love to hear great stories about incredible pitches. So, until next time, catch you later.